Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2025 Wishbook Information Session. I'm glad you can join us today. So for those of you who have not had the opportunity to meet or talk to before, my name is Taryn Lumling. I'm a Philanthropic Operations Associate here at the Pittsburgh Foundation. I've been with the foundation since 2018. I am a Black woman with curly black hair. I'm currently sitting in my home office while wearing a mint green top and a matching bandana. So just jumping straight into it, we're going to give a brief overview about the Wish Book for those who might not be as familiar with the program. I know I looked at the registration list and we had a couple of repeat attendees and applicants as well as some new faces. So all of those new to the process, welcome. The Wish Book is a soft cover printed book. We mail it to our donor base every year in November. So the Pittsburgh Foundation holds donor advised funds as well as other types of funds. And we have numerous donors who establish those funds and advise on them throughout the year. This pool is roughly 2,400 individuals that receive the book. The book contains 100 wishes, which are requests for general operating support. These requests are for $5,000. So those of you who have participated in this process before may remember that it used to be tangible items. So folks would have to say, I want 10 bicycles and 10 helmets and 10 sets of knee pads. Come COVID, we changed that due to the continuously evolving needs that we saw nonprofits were experiencing. It just didn't feel right to ask someone to make a request in July that may not get funded until November, December, or even January. So we wanted to provide that flexibility. And since then, we saw how vital those operating dollars were and continued that process. The Wish Book started over 15 years ago. And again, as I mentioned, it was tangible. So it was really designed to provide that connection for folks because it's fairly easy for donors to understand bicycles, a little harder for them to be ready to give for operating dollars. But again, during the pandemic, we made that transition and really provided that education to get donors more comfortable making operating grants. And just for context, when we talk about the Wish Book and we say general operating dollars, these are funds that are unrestricted. So since 2018, the Wish Book has granted out $3.8 million. Last year's book totaled $541,000. So now that you know what the Wish Book is, we're going to go through the timeline of what the application, review, and production process looks like. So July 15th, the application launched. You should have received an email that invited you to apply. The Wish Book is one of our more open processes, so if you did not receive that email, please don't worry that that's some kind of indicator of eligibility. That's just the contact information that we have available at the time. So it's been open for a couple of weeks, and that brings us to today. You guys are here for our webinar. So as we go through this session, this is to provide a high-level overview of the process and to address questions that you may have. Our next key date is August 18th. That is when applications are due. They are due at 4:59 p.m. That is a Monday. Once we get those applications, they go through multiple rounds of review. So the first one is simply for eligibility, making sure that the rules are followed, that they meet the criteria, that they're within the geographic location, so on and so forth. Anything that maybe is a little bit gray or a little bit muddy, that goes through a second round review with the Vice President and Philanthropic Resources, really just making sure that we are being as fair as possible as we look at that criteria. The last round that is completed is done by our committee. Those folks who participate choose the organizations that go in the book. So by the time organizations get to the committee, they have all been deemed to be eligible. And the committee reviews, and we'll go into a little bit more based off of understanding. So in September, that committee meets and they select the final organizations that are included. Once we have the full list, the nonprofits are notified of decisions. So receive either an approval email or a declination in September. And that's when we get our production process, which is run by our communications team. So production starts in September and runs throughout October and in a little bit into November. All the copy is written for the book. So we have a team of writers who takes the applications that we receive and polishes them up into the words that you see in the final copy. We have photos that are taken by a photography team, so you are asked to submit a photo within your application. If for any reason we can't use that photo, that is okay. We will send out a photographer, that way you have an image accompanying your wish in the book. When we do have a designer, the designer actually creates the layout of the book and sends everything off to the mail house and to the printing house. So we have that physical printed copy at the end of the process. In November, we're in the last stages of proofing, the layout is complete before it is sent to the mail house. Before, fingers crossed, knock on wood, it arrives the week of Thanksgiving. Our goal is always to have it land on mailboxes that Monday before the holiday, so that people can review it together as a family over the holiday. Then the grant period begins. So the grant period starts in November, really December. Grants are paid on a rolling basis. We'll get into a little bit more detail about the grant process later, before finally it concludes in March. Close out the grant period, we close out any remaining grants, and the project's concluded for the year. So going back to that review process I mentioned, these are numbers from 2023, just to kind of give you an idea of the number of applications that we received. This is a competitive process, and we do receive a high volume of applications, as in terms of geographic location is one of our more open processes. It is open to the entire region, whereas many of our processes on our foundation directed side are limited to Allegheny County. So in the past, an example here, we received 262 applications. After that first round of review for blatant eligibility, we got narrowed down to 228. That second round of review, where there were things that maybe were and maybe weren't, when those final calls were made, we ultimately had 196 that went on to the committee for them to review. And they narrowed that down to 100. So as I mentioned, the committee is reviewing on clarity and understanding. They're looking at, is it clear what this organization does? Do I have the necessary information to make a funding decision if I'm a donor? They are not making judgments based on worthiness or value, or they're really looking at, do I have enough information to make an informed decision? Our committee consists of some donors, but as well as community voice. And this is a shift that we made to make sure that we really had folks who had experience in the nonprofit field, providing feedback, folks who have been in your shoes, who understand what it takes to write an application, who recognize that you're not photographers or grant writers, and really take into consideration of the circumstances as you submit these applications. So once we complete the reviews, when you get an approval email, that means you have been selected to be included in the book. However, that is not a guarantee of funding. We'll talk a little bit about the donor-directed grant-making process. Because of this, funding is not guaranteed. A couple of things is an organization may be approved. They may be lucky and get fully funded. They may be very lucky and actually be overfunded. There are circumstances where nonprofits are underfunded, and there are been instances in the book where an organization has not received a grant through the process. And I say that not to discourage you, but just to set realistic expectations. So we look at the timeline, we kind of look at what that review process looks like. How do you get to the application? So to access the application, you have to go to Found It, which is our grants portal. All applications must be submitted electronically through Found It. We do not accept emailed versions. We do not accept paper mailed versions. They must be done through the portal because that's also where the review takes place. So the application opened on the 15th. You can access the application either via the link in the announcement email. You can also go to our website, which is pittsburghfoundation.org. And from there, there's a button in the top of the menu bar that's Grantee Login, and that will take you to Found It. Once you get to the grants portal, you have to have an account to submit an application. So if you already have an account with us, you will use your existing login information to access your applicant dashboard and see from there. If you don't, that is all right, but you will have to sign up in order to access the application. And if you're not sure, please reach out. And then a member of our team will actually check and either get you set it back up with a login if you have one, or tell you how to create yours if you do not. If you have any difficulties with this process, please email our tech support, Rob. His email is r@pittsburghfoundation.org, so pghfdn.org. It's also on the landing page, and he can provide you with assistance. So once you're logged in, that takes you to your applicant dashboard. From there, you'll click on the apply button in the menu bar that is towards the upper left-hand side. All of our open applications can be found under that apply button, except for we do have a few that are invitation only that must be accessed with a code. This is not one of those and will be included in that list. You'll scroll until you find 2025 Wishbook application, accepting submissions from 7/14/2025 to 8/18/2025. Once you find it, there's an apply button right there to the right. You'll click on that. Applications are due on August 18th at 4:59 p.m. This is not negotiable. We do not accept late applications. We do this out of fairness to all the nonprofits that do get their applications on time, as well as because we have a very tight turnaround in terms of review and in terms of production. We really do not have the wiggle room to accept late applications. So please get your applications in on time. So criteria and preference language. What's the difference? So if you fail to meet criteria, that automatically disqualifies an organization from inclusion in the book. Preference language, however, is a little bit more flexible. So if you don't meet the preference language, you might not be included, but you also won't automatically be disqualified. We do give priority to organizations that meet that preference language. So in terms of the criteria, the pieces that you must hit for the wish book, you must be a 501c3 or have a fiscal sponsor. We do have slight exceptions for this, as oftentimes municipalities and churches are not required to file as a 501c3, but you must pass a charity check that we do through GuideStar in order to be included. That way, as grants go out, everything is in compliance with IRS regulations. You may submit only one wish per organization. These wishes are all for operating support. So grants, as they're given out, the purpose will say for general operating support. They will not be given out for project support. That's not to say that you couldn't use general operating grant for a project. However, it won't be issued that specific way. They're all for $5,000. Again, as I mentioned, you may receive that funding, you may be under or over, but they are in the book listed as $5,000. And then you must be located within the region or provide 75% of services within the region. So when we say that, we mean Allegheny, Armstrong, Beaver, Butler, Fayette, Greene, Indiana, Mercer, Lawrence, Somerset, Venango, Washington, or Westmoreland counties. And then lastly, the wish book is limited to small to mid-sized nonprofits. So we're looking at annual budgets of 1.5 million and under. Another note, just going back to the IRS and the 501c3 status, organizations selected for inclusion are listed using the name that is on file with the IRS. This is for consistency across reporting. If for any reason something is weird, you're not registered with the IRS correctly, or there's a glitch in their system, that is okay. What we do is, as the grant applications come in, they're charity checked by our grants team. If there's anything that's weird or a red flag, I'm alerted, and then we reach back out to check with you, because we recognize that with the IRS backlogs and other things, that it might be a case of something's just not updated, in which case we'll ask you for whatever documentation is needed in order to move you forward. So the preference language. So we give preference to organizations that are aligned with our strategic plan. So our strategic plan has 5 main grant making areas, those being arts and culture, economic mobility, environmental action, equity and social justice, and basic needs. These categories are the preferred, and again, not meaning those does not automatically disqualify you. We do have a category for other regional needs, but we tend to lean more towards organizations that fall in line with our strategic goals. And then we also give preference to organizations not included in the previous year's wish book. So if you were in the 2024 edition, preference will be to organizations who weren't. So that's something to consider when filling out the application. More often than not, those that were in the previous year's book are excluded from the book because we want to make sure that we are giving opportunities to nonprofits who haven't had a chance before. However, if there is a uniqueness of service, that tends to be the instance where the committee will lean towards a second consecutive inclusion. Those five grant making areas I mentioned earlier: basic needs, equity and social justice, environmental action, economic mobility, and arts and culture. On this slide, you see there's just a couple of examples of what falls into those buckets. And again, this does not mean that you have to hard set hit them. We'll really look at best fit given either the wish or the nature of the organization. The wish book does not interfere with foundation directed grant making, so there's not the same level of adherence here that there is through our programmatic side. And you can find more information on all of these categories on our website at pittsburghfoundation.org/grant ops. And I'll drop all of these links in the chat at the end of the presentation. So here we have the question list. So these are the questions that are on the actual application. So first, you're asked to briefly describe your organization's mission. We do ask for a budget, but we are just asking for the number. So there are no statements or financial documentation that you need to have prepared. We ask for what county you're in or you serve. You are asked to select one. So you can either be the county that you are located in or the county that you provide the majority of your services in. We recognize that you may serve multiple counties, you might have a very large regional presence, but you do have to select one for the purposes of the book. We asked to what category does your wish fall? So this is going back to those categories we just mentioned, which is best aligned with the services that you're providing or with the nature of the wish itself. We then ask for you to describe your wish. So what are you looking to fund through this process? And I have some tips later that we'll talk about when filling out that section. We then ask for your overall population served. So for this one, we are specifically looking for an annual number, and we are looking for a number and a unit. So we serve 100 families, 32 dogs, 2,000 children. And that takes us into the photo section. So we do ask that you upload a photo that can be used in the book for your wish if you are selected for inclusion. So we do ask that you provide us with a contact as well, so that if we can't use that photo that you submit, that we can send out a photographer and who is the person that will be on site specifically that they will work with. We also ask how long you took to fill out the application. This is not any part of judgment. Our committee is actually told to ignore this. This is simply as a metric. So as we review the applications this year, if I see that the wish book application is actually taking people 18 hours to complete regularly, and there are adjustments on our end that we need to make, because our goal is to have this be a fairly short process, a simple process in terms of the actual application itself. We don't want to take up a lot of your time, especially given that $5,000 is not a lot of funding, and we do recognize that. So if I get feedback that the application is actually extremely tenuous and lengthy, then we'll go back and reevaluate and see how we can simplify that process for folks. And if you are using a fiscal sponsor, we ask what their name is, what their EIN is. And then there's also a checkbox just acknowledging payment information. You can receive payment via check or electronic funds transfer. This box just acknowledges that if you do want an electronic funds transfer, that you will have to submit a separate form in order to provide us with the necessary banking information. So one special change for this year in particular. So the Community Foundation of Westmoreland County is under the Pittsburgh Foundation's umbrella, and they are celebrating their 30th anniversary this year. So to celebrate, we will specifically have 30 organizations in the book that are from Westmoreland County or are serving Westmoreland County, and they will receive a special highlight. It follows the same exact review process. Applications come in the same way. There's no separate application form. They go through the same round of criteria review. They go through the same round of internal review, and then it goes to committee. The only difference is that this committee consists of folks from Westmoreland County and that have a history with the Community Foundation of Westmoreland County. But aside from that, there's no other changes to the process, and it's held to still the same standards. And when the book is designed, they'll actually receive a special designation or marker in honor of the 30th anniversary this year. So a few tips as you fill out your application, just some things to consider. You want to fully but briefly describe your organization, which I know can kind of feel a little bit oxymoronic. Um, but you want to make sure that you're really capturing the breadth that what you're doing, but keeping it succinct. So who you are, what services do you offer, what are your areas of impact? What makes your organization special? If there's a standout program, you can highlight it. You want to avoid being very vague or just sticking to like one sentence descriptions. What may answer the question, it may not provide enough context to make a decision, as I mentioned earlier, which is what the committee evaluates on. But your friends are passionate about your organization. Help the readers of the Wish Book feel that passion too. So you submitted the application, it's gone through the review process, and you just received notification that it's been approved. For now, it's production standpoint, you know it's coming, you need to prep for grants. What does that look like? So before we get into the specifics of the grant process, I feel there's a key distinction I just want to make people aware of ahead of time. The Pittsburgh Foundation describes its grant making kind of in two main buckets. The first being foundation directed grant making. So these are funds directed by the foundation and our program departments. This includes our traditional grant making process and some of our special initiatives. And you can find more information about foundation directed grant making on our website at pittsburghfoundation.org/grants. This is important because, as some of you may be familiar with, our foundation directed grant making process does have a little bit more regulation and rule in regards to how we evaluate when people can apply, what they can apply for, what off years look like. And I say this because the Wish Book is actually donor directed grant making process. So as I mentioned earlier, I've said it a couple times, Wish Book uses donor advised funds. So our donor directed grants are grants that are influenced by the advisors on donor funds, such as donor advised funds. And for those who aren't familiar, a donor advised fund is a fund in which a donor establisher, this can be a person, it could be a couple, it could be a family, it could be a corporation. They invest in asset with a charitable organization, in this case, a community foundation, that being the Pittsburgh Foundation. That fund is invested and they can then recommend grants from that fund to valid 501c3 organizations. We do not solicit our donor advised funds, so we do not send them direct asks. Our process we describe as donor directed because they have to come to us and show an interest or express a grant they wish to make. We do work closely to provide them with education and resources, but we don't solicit anyone through any of our processes, including the Wish Book. Because this is a donor directed process, what that means is if you're also seeking a foundation directed grant, or if you have an open grant that's foundation directed, they do not interfere with each other. Foundation directed grant making and donor directed grant making are separate, and eligibility for one does not exclude you from the other. So once we get to the point where grants are going, as I mentioned, donor advised funds are a vehicle. Our donors receive the book, they review it, and they recommend grants to nonprofits in the book. This grant recommendation period lasts from November till March, and grants are paid on a rolling basis. So they may select to partially fund an organization or to fully fund it. So you might receive one $5,000 check throughout, you might receive a bunch of $250 checks. It really depends on the donors in that given year. We do not require acknowledgement letters or thank yous unless we specifically specify it in the letter for the Wish Book grant. So generally, we do not have to provide one. We recognize that those letters can be burdensome and cumbersome, and we really wanted to simplify this process. We do have some specific individuals who those notes are of very high value to them. And if they do request that, the information to provide it will be included in that letter. Otherwise, you're safe to assume that you are not required to do one for this specific grant. As I mentioned earlier, because this is a donor-directed process, full funding is not guaranteed. We've been very lucky to have a lot of full funding throughout the years. However, there is a potential for it to be underfunded or not funded. Put my contact information in the chat. So if you have any questions, it's also on the application, it's also on the Wishbook landing pages. You're welcome to send me an email, or give me a phone call, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you everyone for attending today. We had some really great questions. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their Friday and a good weekend.